Hey everyone, if you'd like to learn about Chinese diet therapy, I'm going to give you a sample of what's in my new course right after this video. So this is going to be value for you, not just a clickbaity thing to try to sell you something, but I am also selling something. And why am I doing that? To promote Chinese medicine, of course, but also to help to provide value to you, and you can support the channel. We don't run ads and other things on this channel as best as I can. I try to keep that to a real minimum. And purchasing courses from me helps to keep the lights on, literally buy new lights and buy cameras and things and audio equipment to make the channel great and make Chinese medicine great. It was already great to begin with. We don't need to make it greater. But anyway, without further ado, I'll let you have a little sample of what's in the course. You can see the quality and whatever's in there, and this will kind of help you understand. This course is called Better Gut Health with Chinese Medicine. So this is talking about the spleen and stomach as the cooking pot on the stove and how to understand that. So if you are struggling with understanding why should I eat cooked foods, why should I follow the dietary advice that my practitioner's given me, I just don't understand it. This is going to give you a real in-depth understanding to that. So enjoy the sample and I'll see you again at the end. So the point of the class today is to build on the concepts we went through last week, talking about what is the spleen and stomach, what is the concept of the earth element, what does it, essentially we want to know what that earth element likes, so that we can then put the food in that's going to optimize that system. That's, if we have to boil it down, simmer it down into a nutshell, that's what it's about. And so today we're going to review and explain that concept again of the spleen and stomach as the cooking pot on the stove. And I'll give you like a quicker overview of it, but just maybe talk about it in a slightly different way. How that relates to digestion, gut health, the separation of the clear and the turbid, which is essentially the absorption of nutrients. That's how Chinese medicine thinks of that. Then we're going to dive into all this different new stuff. So to differentiate, number two, differentiate between foods and cooking methods that promote what that spleen and stomach like. So as in, what are some of the food examples? And then we'll go into these different cooking methods. So number three is those methods. Identify and describe a range of traditional cooking methods. So just, you could even take the word traditional out of there, just cooking methods. So these are things that chefs know about. When you do cooking classes, they will teach you this. I remember doing some of these things back in year 8 in school, first year of high school, home economics. We had a class where you learned how to create a roux. You learned how to do a saute. You learned how to do these basic methods. But what we're going to talk about today is not necessarily how to do those methods. You can find out how to do those methods and the various ways of doing those methods from almost, there's a lot of YouTube videos on teaching you how to do that, or a cooking class or these kinds of things. But why would we want to use those methods? What do those methods do in Chinese medicine? We did last week, thinking about if your spleen and the stomach as the cooking pot on the stove. So here, put my mouse on there so you can see we've got the pot. And we've got, that represents the stomach, the pot. The fire below the pot, the stove, the gas of the stove represents the spleen qi. And together, these things are the earth, the yin and the yang of the earth. Now, interestingly enough, and there are some of these paradoxical things in Chinese medicine where it's like, it's all this except this one thing. It's quite a few of those. The spleen is a yin organ, but it's dealing with the yang, mostly a yang function, and that sometimes, especially newer students, can have a bit of trouble getting their head around that concept sometimes. But its job is to provide the fuel of the stove, of the whole system. It's providing the energy. And I've depicted the clear and the turbid with the two different colors here. So you can see that the clear, let's say you eat a meal, and this is a person that's looking after their diet quite well. So let's say more than half is what we would say clear. Now, what do we mean by clear? Okay, as in, it's not just junk food. It's not just like, a bowl of ice cream that you eat because it tasted yummy and it was a treat time. there's not much clear in that food, as in it's not that it's creamy food, it's just that there's not much nutrient in it. There's not much that your body actually wants out of it. Okay, so this would be someone that is eating like a steak and some veggies, and maybe if they had some chips with it, that might be the turbid. Okay, your body isn't going to use every single thing that you give it, depending on what your diet is. And so some of the stuff that could be used as clear might end up as turbid. Now, how do we know it ends up as turbid? Because it's going to be poo. It's pooped. It's pooped out. It means your body doesn't need it. That's waste. But it's going to go through a process down through your digestive system to try and extract everything that it can as it goes through the system, as best as it can. It's going to try to get clear out of the stuff you give it, which is why people can eat a what we might say, very terrible diet and they don't die. Okay, they're not thriving, but their body hasn't carked it, hasn't killed over just yet. Like sometimes I watch those shows, 100-pound life, 600 pounds life. You saw that documentary that maybe was done a while ago, the Super Size Me, the guy that said, I'll just eat McDonald's. What happens if I just eat Macca's for the rest of my life? That's what we call McDonald's in Australia, Macca's. Not for the rest of my life, but for this particular period of time, right? And that's a lot of turbid in that stuff, a lot of processed foods. But there is some, your body's still going to do its best to try to extract something out of it that it can use. So the clear, this is a metaphorical thing, of course, the clear ascends and the turbid descends. Now, when you go and learn proper Chinese medicine in a course, they're going to spend a lot more time on telling you what happens here, because the food and the fluids go off in different places to your lungs, and your lungs have a role. The metal element has a role in metabolizing fluids and things like that. But for the purpose of self-care, self-treatment, and honestly, like even just as a practitioner to understand it, you don't need to get into that detail here. Like basically just understand that your stomach likes these three things. It likes the warm, cooked, and moist. It doesn't like cold, dry, and raw. And when you put things in it that are warm, moist, and cooked, now it does matter what that food is. We're going to go into that in more detail. And there's a decent amount of clear possibility in that food. It's not just all junk food, okay? Like you could eat a McDonald's burger and you could technically say it's mostly warm, moist, and cooked, although we'll come to some understanding of how it may not be like that, even though it's warm. The burger's warm when you got it. We're not saying, you've got to be a bit sensible here, right? Not saying that just all burgers and stuff like, junk food fits that category, so that's okay. So the clear ascends and the turbid descends, and the turbid is the bright green here. And then your body tries to get any nutrients it can out of that stuff that's initially separated, and that happens in the small intestine, and then it's going to happen again and again about 3 times, and until it gets to the large intestine and it ends up as feces, ends up being excreted out. Now, the same principle of the idea happens, but with fluids, and that's going to go eventually to the bladder as waste, right? The water that your body doesn't need. The system of this whole system for both water and foods relies on strong spleen energy, or yang in the body, fire, if you like, the fire of the digestion, which is the yang, to do that job. And this is a little bit off topic, but I'm sure that people are thinking about this question. Like, what about people that drink a lot of water and then they just wee a lot of water out? They drink it. As soon as they drink it, they have to go and wee. Like, maybe not instantaneously, but they are, drinking and urinating a lot. So your body, because let's say it's just water, It's not like it's indicated that it's turbid and it's like, oh, it's got to get this out. This is toxic. This isn't good. Um, in some cases, it's sufficiently moisturized and your body doesn't need any more water. And that's a good thing. Then it goes, okay, it can excrete that water out. But sometimes people are very dry. They're very dry on the outside. They've got dry skin. They've got this dry mouth and they keep on drinking and drinking and they're weeing and weeing. Why is that happening? Often that's because of a kind of yang deficiency where their body just can't metabolize the water. So to give you the example, how would I metabolize this water? I have to vaporize it. I have to provide some heat which steams it and then that vaporizes it. So just imagine you're cooking up, if you've ever tried to cook up a pasta or thought, oh, I'll cook pasta, the first thing you need to do is boil the water, or you're going to steam some veggies and you boil the water, but you went off and did something else and you come back and the water has almost boiled down because you left it there going. And you thought, oh no, whoops, I forgot to put the pasta in or something like that. I mean, that's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. It hasn't. It may, yeah. You can look forward to that. Why doesn't that water just stay there? Because the heat is enough to vaporize it. So this is all just basic physics, right? So the same thing happens in our body. If there's not that heat that yang, that function, the body can't absorb it properly, and they drink and drink, and they still are not hydrated, not moisturized. Yeah. Cool. So what helps the body, what helps tonify the body or promote what the body wants is warm, cooked, and moist. What it doesn't like is cold, dry, and raw. Now, I will harp on about this more times, but it's important that we kind of get a really good understanding of it. You think, oh, we did this last week. Well, we need to do it again, because this is where it's all going to come back to this. And that's where we need to understand what our body wants. And then we look at what the foods are that we're eating, the cooking methods we're using on them. And that's essentially and how we're assessing whether that's healthy for us. So another way of describing this is called the Qing Dan diet. Now, the translation of that is clear, bland diet. Qing Dan diet. And there are a few, I'm sure that there's a Bob Flores book. I don't have that book, but something about the Qing Dan diet, which is, just sort of stuff like what I'm talking about now. But you may come across that in some readings of Chinese medicine, and that's a good thing if you follow. And that is more of a clear diet, eating more stuff that's more clear and less stuff that's turbid. So we're going to go through in a minute what that is. So what's warm, cooked, and moist? Okay. How do we promote warm, cooked, and moist? We will think about this. We'll kind of overview this in the cooking methods as well. But one of the ways is understanding what method you've used to prepare that food, if any. Okay. So no method would be raw. It's just like it is. But we first have to understand the original nature of the food. So some foods are cold. Some foods are just cold. For instance, what's a cold food? A cucumber is cold. How will we know what these foods are? Well, when we go through the individual foods, we'll go through those things. I'll give you the foods and the natures of the foods. So right now we're thinking about what the categories of those foods, when we say it's cold, what does that mean that it does? So we understand what the original nature of the food is, and then can we even change that nature? We might be able to enhance that nature or help to mitigate against a nature. For instance, you cook a cucumber. What happens when you cook a cucumber? It's still a cucumber. It's still cold, but it's not as cold. And I think I mentioned this last week. The best example I've ever seen of this is in China, where I've seen fried cucumber cooked with garlic. So what they did is have big chunks of the cucumber and they had sort of fried. Now, it's the cooking method itself, frying, has a bit of a drying effect. But cucumber is very, very moist. It's full of liquid, it's full of fluid. So does it cancel each other out? No. If the end product that you're eating is still juicy, it's still a moist food. Yep. Its nature, some foods' natures are so strong that they really can't be changed very easily. So I'll just draw your attention to this little spectrum of things, and this will be in your notes as a thing to fill in the gaps. So you can have cold or hot on either end, okay? So we'll have hot and we'll have cold. And then you do have a nature called neutral. Now, that's something like rice. Most grains have a neutral nature. So what that often means is that like product will take on the nature of whatever else it's cooked with. The whole dish becomes a nature. So you have individual foods, right? So let's say we're going to cook a curry is probably a good example. Okay. So you might have, I'm going to give a tick for the various ingredients. So let's say when you're going to cook a curry, you will have a few condiments that overpower the whole nature of the dish. For instance, you have a chili and you might have cardamom. Now I'm just going to tick roughly where they would be on this spectrum of hot to cold, right? Let's say you've got cardamom, coriander. What else? I'm not just randomly what you put in the cumin, garam masala, these kinds of things. Let's say you've got some of those sort of stuff in there, right? Now, obviously you've got a red chili and a green chili, which are, the hotter they can be even hotter than hot. Well, not hotter than hot, but you get the idea, right? Now, those things are only small amounts of the ingredients. But even increasing a tiny bit more of that ingredient can really overpower the flavor of the dish. And then what's the main ingredient in the dish, right? It's going to have some kind of meat. So most meats are warm. Most meats sit here in the framework of, okay, most meats. So for instance, goat, lamb are the most warm or hot of the meats. And something like chicken is still warm, but it's definitely not as hot as the goat or the lamb. Now, no textbook is going to give it to you like I'm just giving it to you now. So please be aware that this is how should we say it? Like I'm not making this up, but it's an assimilation of the knowledge. Okay, it's not like, someone else might say, "Oh, Marie, cardamon's here." It's not here. Like, okay, this is sort of a rough guide. But we could definitely say, chicken. I don't think goat and lamb. Well, I know they're not as hot as a chili. There's no way that they are. Now, something that you put with a curry usually is either some kind of naan breads, some kind of breads, or some kind of rice. And some people don't have that; they don't eat those things, and that's fine. But if you did have that, the rice is going to be here. And let's say you had half the container full of rice, we might give like a few ticks there because the volume of the meal, the half of the bowl is rice and half of it's the curry with the sauce that you're putting on. What's the sauce made out of? We might have some tomato. Tomatoes have a cooler nature. They're not really cold. We might have some cream. and yogurt, or let's say you make the sauce with yogurt, it's going to be sort of cool to neutral sort of flavor. Nature, and so on. So then you've got this profile of this dish here, right? This has got, let's say this has got 10 ingredients, and each individual food has its own nature. Okay. It doesn't take a person on a course or a rocket scientist to work out that a curry is going to be hot, and there are various versions of how hot it can be. And that hotness is usually related to how much spices are in the curry, like which, how much, whether it even has chili, or some don't have chili at all, can make a big difference. And you will probably notice that something that's got goat or lamb is actually a hotter dish. And that's because the innate nature of that meat is hotter than something like chicken. So for instance, a vindaloo, a lamb korma, okay, or a lamb, obviously you have vindaloo and tindaloo, they're the hottest. That's much hotter than a butter chicken, right? And just the nature, you could make a butter lamb with the same sauce, but that lamb itself is going to be hotter. It's going to have a warmer function on the body. So I hope you enjoyed that sample, and you can see the quality of the learning that I'm doing. Alongside this course is an interactive workbook provided to you, which has got sort of fill in the blanks and stuff to keep you entertained, or keep your attention while you're doing the course. And I would love to see you in there to help you learn more about Chinese medicine in a structured way, Chinese dietetics. So you can click the link below this or in the description of this video to find out more about what's in the course. It's a 3-part series, and it's sort of like an intro into what is Chinese diet therapy all about, and it's teaching you how to think like a Chinese medicine practitioner would about foods. So how do we think about foods as medicine? What are the properties of foods? And what foods should we eat in different seasons, and how does our gut health kind of work? So if you're suffering with inflammation in your gut, or your bowels aren't working well, just these different things, these are really important signs of your body that things aren't working well down there. We want to try to fix that, and one of the ways we can intervene, and certainly intervene preventatively to avoid that from happening in the first place, is through Chinese medicine dietetics, which is using foods as medicine. Sometimes it's just avoiding foods. It's not even adding foods in. It's just stopping certain things. So there's no cost in stopping something because you're saving money. You're not having it anymore. Anyway, so I hope you will enjoy this series, and welcome you to kind of sign up or find out more about it at the link below. Thanks.